The A-10 Thunderbolt Thesro sat at the far end of the runway like a sleeping beast, silent, sun-baked, forgotten. Everyone at Falcon Range Air Base called it the museum piece. But that morning, as a group of young pilots laughed around it, an old veteran with silver hair and sun-weathered skin placed his hand on the cold metal. His eyes softened with a memory none of them carried. "Go on, old-timer," the captain joked loudly. "Start it up. Let's see if you still remember how to wake a dragon." Everyone expected the veteran to laugh it off. No one expected the engines to roar to life, and absolutely no one expected the base commander himself to sprint across the tarmac the moment he heard it. This is the story of what happened before and after that deafening roar. Most stories about legends begin in battle, but this one started in a dusty, forgotten hangar. The old veteran, Frank Dalton, known around the base cafeteria simply as Mr. Frank, had been volunteering at Falcon Range, fixing tools, sweeping floors, lending advice nobody asked for. To the young cadets, he was a harmless relic of the past. A sweet old man with a limp and a smile, the type who'd tell war stories that seemed too grand to be true. That morning, Captain Harris and his flight team had gathered near the retired A-10, waiting for the mechanics to finish checking another jet. Harris, cocky and young, saw Frank slowly pacing near the aircraft and nudged his team with a grin. "You know that thing hasn't started in over a decade, right?" Harris said. "Bet the old guy doesn't even remember what half the switches do." The cadets laughed. Not cruelly, just young, careless. Frank heard them, but he didn't respond. He simply kept running his fingertips along the A-10's titanium skin. His silence made Harris smirk. "Mr. Frank," the captain shouted, "why don't you start her up for us? Show us how the dinosaurs used to fly!" Frank turned his head, struggled a bit to climb the ladder, then eased himself into the cockpit. The cadets gasped as if watching a grandfather climb into a race car. Inside, the cockpit wrapped around him like the embrace of an old friend. Dusty switches, faded labels, cracked seat cushion. But Frank's hands didn't tremble. They settled with a confidence that startled even him. He closed his eyes. He wasn't in a hangar anymore. He was 24 again, flying over desert firestorms, listening to the engines howl like wolves. Outside, Captain Harris folded his arms, ready for the punchline. But Frank didn't joke. He exhaled a shaky breath and flipped a switch. A sound, small, came from deep within the machine. The cadets froze. Harris blinked. Airmen walking by stopped mid-step. The A-10 coughed, growled, and then its engines ignited, sending a thunderous roar across the base. A dust storm spiraled behind it, scattering papers, knocking over cones, and making the pilots shield their eyes. The entire runway trembled. Birds exploded from nearby roofs like a panicked cloud. "TURN, ITOF!" Harris yelled over the wind, but Frank wasn't listening. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight, eyes locked on the horizon, reliving something far bigger than the moment. That's when the colonel, Commander Reeves, burst out of the operations building like he'd been launched from a cannon. "WHO started Tata, you're afty!" he bellowed, sprinting down the tarmac. Everyone pointed to Frank. Reeves stopped dead in his tracks when he saw who sat in the cockpit. His anger evaporated. His voice softened. "Frank." The old pilot looked down with a quiet, almost apologetic smile. "Just warming her up, Colonel. She asked for it." Reeves swallowed hard. He stepped closer, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "I thought you'd never fly again," Reeves whispered. Frank didn't respond. Not yet. Not until the past finished speaking inside him. Once the engines shut down and the deafening roar faded, tension settled over the airstrip like dust after a storm. Colonel Reeves ordered everyone back inside. The cadets shuffled nervously, whispering, avoiding the old man's eyes. Captain Harris looked sick, realizing his joke had nearly turned into a disaster, or something far greater. In the colonel's office, the door closed behind Frank with a soft click. Reeves walked around him slowly, like studying a ghost he wasn't sure was real. "You were supposed to retire quietly," the colonel finally said, voice tight. "Doctors said your heart." Frank cut him off gently. "I know what they said. But out there on the runway, I didn't feel old. I felt alive again. For the first time in years. The colonel sat down. His expression softened with something between admiration and sorrow. You trained half the pilots on this base, Reeves murmured. Including me. You kept this country safe longer than some of these kids have been alive. But starting up that jet, you could have hurt yourself. Frank sighed. Can't hurt what's already worn out. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was honest. Reeves leaned back. The real reason that jet was still here, he said quietly, was because it's the same aircraft you flew during Operation Iron Veil. I kept it on base out of respect. I never thought you'd touch it again. Frank's eyes shimmered. She saved my life. Twice. Reeves nodded. I know. The colonel then stood and placed his hand on Frank's shoulder. I'm not angry. I'm grateful. Hearing those engines again felt like hearing a piece of history breathe. Later that afternoon, Reeves gathered the entire flight team in the briefing hangar. The cadets lined up stiffly, waiting for punishment. Instead, the colonel did the unexpected. He motioned Frank to stand beside him. This man, Reeves announced, he's the reason you get to call yourselves pilots. He flew missions you'll only read about. He survived battles that textbooks don't even mention. Today was not a joke gone wrong. Today was a lesson. The cadets looked at Frank with new eyes, not at an old man, but at a living legend. Captain Harris stepped forward, shame on his face. Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Frank smiled kindly. Son, none of us know what someone's lived through. That's why respect comes first. The cadets bowed their heads. Reeves continued, voice steady. From this day on, Mr. Frank Dalton is officially reinstated, not as a pilot, but as our senior advisor. Anyone who wants to learn what real flying is will learn from him. The room erupted in applause. Frank felt something warm bloom inside him, something he thought had died long ago, belonging. That evening, as the sun set over the quiet airbase, Frank walked back to the A-10. He touched the metal gently, whisperings, "Thank you for one last roar." And somewhere in the fading light, he could swear the old jet answered him, not with sound, but with memory. In the end, the A-10 didn't just roar. It reminded everyone that some legends don't fade. They simply wait for the right moment to return. And sometimes, the loudest echoes come from the quietest heroes.